And now, so Susan, my first question to you of the night is, I know that you've said that every choice that we make affects our lifespan, and I wonder if you'd explain to us what you mean by that.
Well, you know, you and I are of the same generation, so how many people that you and I grew up with are no longer alive? People who were either less lucky in terms of genetics, or people who sex, drugs, and rock and roll took them away. Now, that's, you know, people who didn't make it to our age, but now we're watching people who are our age and are not taking care of themselves now. So you have to really focus. I mean, when you're young, of course you want to have fun. And you want to have fun in such a way that it doesn't leave permanent damage on your liver or your kidneys or some other part of your body, right? And then as you get older, it's even more important to take care of yourself. And when I speak about getting older and take care, I don't mean so much the physical part as the immune system, detoxification, which is so crucial. So at every age that we enter, there's a different kind of intelligent life. And we have to be up to date, and we have to really focus on it, make intelligent choices.
Well, thank you. How very sensible, of course. Wonderful. Well, so now I'm curious, how does whole brain function support us to have the longest and most healthy life? And what happens if we really don't have that full brain functioning?
Yes, this is really crucial, because this is what I speak to almost every single client about when they first work with me. And I was explaining that to somebody just today, and I was explaining that to her boyfriend just last night, that every problem that they're describing in their family dynamic can be traced back to someone needing more whole brain function. So Fred, if you would put that map up for just a moment, thank you so much. So if someone is missing some of the rational self, then they're not logically analyzing information and data and dollars and numbers, and they make perhaps some very poor choices about health or about legal situations or both, because they're not practical enough. They're not logical enough. If the person makes very poor choices in the green section, the safekeeping self, then they're just not being safe enough. They may be risky decisions that don't pay off, and some risky decisions you can't afford to have. Lower right, if people are missing that, then they're not caring about other people's feelings. They end up alone and not wanting to be alone. And upper right, if people are not enough of the experimental self, then as they get older, they don't have any peace, they don't learn to meditate, they don't learn to take it easy, and then they find themselves exhausted. So it always boils down to that. If you have whole brain function, or if you learn about whole brain function from me, and then you manually attend to it, it may not be natural, but that doesn't mean that even though it's not natural that I don't do it. I'm making sure that I'm hitting each of those 4 quadrants every day.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan. That's a lot of information that's so very valuable. Now, I'm curious, why is it so crucial to plan and envision the future long before we get there?
Well, we know people, you and I think everybody watching, you know people who are in their 80s and they're lost. Either they didn't figure out what it would be like if their spouse or partner died, or they didn't figure out what would happen if they didn't have a career that would sustain them irrespective of the vagaries of jobs and businesses and companies and the economy. Or they didn't take into consideration what would happen if they maintained an addictive behavior and the toll that it would take on their body, etc. So you have to be able to really analyze and really look to see, am I making the safe choices? Am I making the best choices? Or am I just assuming that somehow it's all going to take care of itself? We get a lot of that. In Santa Barbara, we have a lot of very right-brained people, very, very hopeful that it's all going to work out, and I don't have any evidence that that's a practical way to live or a safe way to live, or that it's going to pay off, because usually it's what a gambler would say. Well, hey, I've got my rent money, I got my mortgage money, and I just have a feeling about red 7, And then, of course, red 7 has a small chance of coming in, and then they're shocked that they've lost their rent or their mortgage money. Well, I hate to see people gambling with their lives, gambling with their future.
Thank you, Susan. Once again, a little reality check.
On a regular basis,
Yes.
right? Yes, please, please.
So therefore, are there actually stages of our lives during which our priorities actually change?
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. You and I are very different from the people we were when we were in our 20s and 30s, even though we didn't know each other. We've talked about it. It's amazing to me how many people that I know are doing the same things that they always did. I don't quite understand it. You know, women and men who were running around in their 20s and 30s and 40s, who were running around in their 70s, it just seems so exhausting to me. You know, and yet, you know, that's the choice they make. And so, yes, you have different stages. You have a stage when you're young. It's all about education. It's all about building a career. Then it may be all about having a family and children. Then it's got to be about stabilizing your health and stabilizing your life and planning for the future. That has to come next.
Taking care of oneself, imagine that. Thank you, Susan. So important. And so therefore, why is it so important to actually go ahead and change your focus from stage to stage?
Well, if somebody wants, like my former stepfather is in his mid-90s, and he takes great care of himself. My grandmother lived to be 94, and for 93 years, she was in great shape. And my grandmother was the classic example of self-discipline. She would bake these incredible desserts, and she would have like a forkful. And she would say, I enjoy a forkful as much as I enjoy the whole piece, which I don't understand. She would get up every morning, she would do floor exercises for 30 minutes, long before anybody was practicing yoga. You know, I'm talking about in the 40s, 50s, 60s, etc. My grandmother would get out of bed and she would do floor exercises for 30 minutes. I mean, it's stunning to me. She would read Gaylord Hauser, who was all about natural foods and pure foods, and she would eat a very, very healthy diet for the time. And yeah, she had a drink every night. You know, it used to be scotch, then it became a glass of wine. So she had a drink every night, but she was all about balance and moderation, which I honestly didn't understand until I hit, 50-something. But then I hit it like a brick wall, right? And I suddenly understood this is not optional. These are the choices we have to make if we're interested in living a healthy life and living a long time and dying in good health. There's no law that says that people have to get sick before they die. I'm not interested in getting sick and dying. You know, it's just not interesting to me. So those are the different stages, and we have to adjust ourselves as we move through them.
Thank you. Boy, that word discipline and paying attention to that, that's so, thank you, Susan.
Yes.
That's really a big one to consider.
Yeah, for all of us.
All the time, yes. Well, all right, let's explore what do you consider the most serious challenges that people have as they age?
Well, there's no question that addiction is the #1 killer of human beings, at least in this country. Certainly in countries where they're extremely poor, like India in the old days, they didn't have money for liquor. Though in countries like Russia, where they certainly didn't have wealth for most of the people, they couldn't buy food, they couldn't buy bread, they couldn't buy clothing, but they could always buy vodka, So different countries have different problems, but for us it's addiction. And if we look around at Santa Barbara, we see the quantity of 12-step meetings that are here, and the fact that AA doesn't go out and grab people off the streets who are homeless. They will not do that. So if you add the AA population plus the people who are still using drugs and alcohol, it's a shocking percentage of our population. And so as you get older, there's just no question, people who are still using and they're still drinking more than their body can tolerate, let alone enjoy, they're not going to make it. And they don't have the ability to really get clear. They're in denial. That's a big component of addiction, denial. and they don't see the cost. And the cost, to me, is quite horrendous. To you, that's why we're so disciplined. And the thought of seeing these people suffer the way they're suffering today, and that their body will become more and more exhausted, the symptomatic component of it will get more and more serious, and then at some point it will become a crisis. And of course, to me, I so want them to get it cured now, because I know what happens with these organic supplements and these saliva tests. It's astounding. I have 2 clients who last week went off anti-anxiety medication after 15 years. They did it with O Vitamin Pro and Mary and supplements. They did it in a seamless way. Both of them were on anti-anxiety meds and sleeping medication for about 15 years each. They both went off it. They're each telling me they're enjoying life for the first time in 15 years.
Perfect.
That's simple. You know, that's simple.
So they can turn their life around and extend it.
And they
now.
did, right, and they did. And you know, Howard Wills, who I just spent fabulous, you know, I just spent most of a week with, and he says, human beings are renewable resources. You can make peace, you can get healthy, you can clear yourself, your mind and your body, of all of this illness and this dis-ease. I've seen him do it, you know, with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and with me. And human beings are renewable resources, so we can get well, we can do better, we can have a great life.
I love that term. Thank you. How
Isn't that great?
encouraging
Great.
for whatever anyone is going through.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Call me and I'll connect you to Howard. He's a miracle worker.
Yes, he is.
The greatest, the greatest.
A worker, healer, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, now we're going to explore Dr. Fitzgerald, who I know spoke to you about stress this week, especially again, when you saw her down in Santa Monica. So would you share with us what she had to say?
Oh, this was so fabulous. I was with my dearest friend who's dealing with this really lousy health situation, and she got some bad news on Tuesday, and she was going to fly back to New York. And I said to her, nope, I'm not driving into the airport. Put on your seatbelt. We're going to Dr. Fitzgerald's. And she said, whoa, 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 whoa. I said, put on your seatbelt. I'm driving you to Dr. Fitzgerald. I've wanted to drive you to Dr. Fitzgerald for all this time. Now you got a problem. Now it's even more serious. We're going today. So I sat outside of her office, and I called her and spoke to her office manager, and I told him the situation. And I said, we need 10 minutes of her time, that's all. We cannot leave. There's nobody else who can help. There's just not another doctor anywhere who knows as much as Patricia does about all the different systems of healing that are outside the box. And she's a genius. You know, she's a holistic physician who lectures to MDs. So she's a genius. So we got in there, and she said to my friend, you know, there is now substantial proof that stress either turns on genetic illnesses or turns off the genetic illness. And that, of course, is what Howard's been doing. You know, when Howard works with us, our body, and then he works with us going back 10 or more generations, he is turning the gene off. Because we see people who've been diagnosed with cancer, and they have tests, and they have tumors, and they have scans and all this, and the proof is that they have cancer and cancer and cancer, and then he works on them, and they go back and they have the same test again, and the doctors are scratching their head and crazed, and I don't understand. And the difference is that Howard Wills has done something that we don't understand yet, but you know, the Harvard geneticist is going to presumably figure all this out in the fall. God willing, we'll all know how he does this. But in the meantime, who cares? What really counts is that he's able to have an impact in some way on our immune system, so that the gene that I had that dictated that I would end up with asthma turned itself off somehow, and here I am, perfectly healthy, no medication in years and years. And all the other people that you and I have met who've been in his presence. So somehow there's something more to it, and as Dr. Fitzgerald said, we now know that stress can turn on the gene, or if there's no stress or you eliminate stress, it can turn off the gene.
Oh boy, another thing to pay big attention to.
Yeah, I mean, that's why every single person that I've heard of who has been diagnosed with cancer and has been cured has eliminated stress from their life. Simply, as I've said to my dear friend, I said, no, they just turn the corner. It's not the stress goes away. They just stop paying attention to it, stop looking at it. They just walk the other way. You just turn the corner, right?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I could sit here and you could sit here and we could worry about 1,000 things. Not worth it.
No.
So we choose not to. We just walk the other way.
Very clear. Thank you so much. Very inspiring, isn't it? Oh my gosh, there's a way out.
There is! Take it, please!
For everyone's own good and all of our best interests.
Really?
That's our intent. Now, okay, why do some people, let's say, see their way out of trouble and some don't? And can you describe some of the, let's say, few of the biggest pitfalls during illness?
Yeah, what I've been seeing is denial. I've been seeing so much denial. And then I've been seeing so much obsession. So both sides of the same coin. So I've watched people who don't get cured since they never really understand what's going on in their mind and their body. And they never commit themselves to transforming it, and they don't transform it. So that's denial. They think, well, if I just keep doing what I'm doing. My joke about my mother was when my mother died, she had purchased, I don't know, thousands and thousands of dollars of her favorite shoes, her favorite makeup, her favorite this, her favorite that. And it was all, you know, there, ready for her, but she was dying. So I think what must have happened to her, and she was a very intelligent woman and a very practical woman, but I think at that one day she said to herself, I'm just not going to think about it. And, you know, maybe if I just go out and I buy things, maybe somehow I'm going to last. But it was crazy, all these brand new Charles Jourdain shoes and lipstick and stuff. It was really sad. But I see that in so many people that I've worked with who are very ill. And the thing to do is do the research, calm oneself down, eliminate every possible stress, detox immediately, go to any one of the places like Optimum Health or the Hippocrates Institute or any of the places in America or elsewhere where it's possible to completely detox and take all that pressure off the system, and people again and again get well in these places or as a result of these places. And then the opposite is the person who's so obsessed about what's happening to his or her body. There, you know, all these hypochondriacal symptoms, and it's like a Woody Allen movie where he was always thinking he was going to die. Remember all those movies about death? You know, he was going to die, he was going to die, he was going to die. He's older than we are. He's perfectly healthy as far as I know. He just made a brand new movie. Obviously, he was wrong. You know? So somewhere between, you know, completely obsessing that, you know, every hangnail may be a symptom, and ignoring very, very serious symptoms and diagnoses and making no life changes. Somewhere between those is what my father used to call intelligent neglect. So you know what's going on, you're watching what's going on, and you don't like rush to judgment and race around going to all these different experts for conflicting opinions in many cases,
yes.
you know? We see a lot of it.
Oh, brilliant man, your father. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Susan. That was so much great information. Okay, let's explore. Why do some people stay, let's say, very busy and expect that to lead to actual great longevity? And how does that work then?
Well, it's really interesting. Have you ever known someone who loved working so much that when he was forced to retire, which usually happens to men, not women in old days, he was forced to retire, he would come home and he would drop dead a week or a month later. You've heard those
Yes.
stories, right? Yeah, because they really loved their work and they didn't know what to do with themselves when they got home, or they really lost their self-image of who they were, and so life was really disappointing and confusing. The alternative to that, though, is the person who has this ability to rest and recuperate and does not. So you have to, again, it's about balance. Sometimes you're healthy and you can work, and my stepfather loves what he does. He's turning 93, and he is a stockbroker. And he goes to work at Wells Fargo every single day. And last year, he used to fly back from Saratoga Springs, the Wells Fargo office, to go back home to Charlotte, North Carolina, to work there every day. I mean, every Sunday he would be on a plane.
Oh, my.
Now I pray that this year he's actually just using his office in Saratoga Springs all the time for the summer. I hope so. But he loves his work, he's in great shape, his mind is perfect, and there's no reason for him to retire. At the same time, he's not, in la-la land. He takes care of himself. So it's a balance.
Beautiful story. Oh, I like that. Wonderful. It even points out how we can enjoy and love what we do, whatever it may be, how healthy that is.
Yes.
Thank you, Susan. Now, how can we create balance at the different stages throughout our life when it requires some real change?
You wouldn't want to make those changes because there's a crisis. So consequently, that's your choice. You can either have your teeth cleaned regularly, or you may not enjoy really good dental health, right? We know that. And I'm not saying having scans and tests 33 times in order to make sure all your organs are functioning. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that there are certain things you need to do. Eliminate stress. Eat organically. Avoid a certain amount of sugar so you can have a fairly alkaline system. Avoid tap water and drink pure water. All these basic things. Get enough sleep. Most Americans get like a third or a half of the sleep that I get. I need a lot of sleep. I get a lot of sleep. I don't understand why that's so complicated. I really don't. And I'm not talking about people with small children.
Yes.
I mean people who just don't understand that if they're exhausted, that they aren't really allowing their body to recuperate overnight and be ready for the next day. That's what I'm talking about.
That seems like a big one, a
Yes.
simple fix, right?
Like common sense. Common
Yes.
sense. And I just started taking this product that the Charis were recommending to me. I told you about that Limu.
Oh, yes.
I am telling you, it works.
Perfect.
Because I came back from LA, I was exhausted, totally exhausted. And then yesterday I picked up the package of the Limu that had arrived. And so I drank it yesterday and I drank it today. And I'm telling you, I feel more alive, more healthy, and more present. The stuff really works. But you can track it because it's supposed to also make me thinner, so we'll see. That's what I'm waiting for.
We'll keep everyone posted on that.
I won't have to. They'll see me at they'll see me at Trader Joe's or whatever. They go, I don't know. I don't think it's working. Take more. So it has nothing to. It's not a diet product, but it's a detox, and because it detoxes you, it gives you tremendous energy. And so then you have more energy. You do more, so you're burning off more calories.
Oh, I love it.
Very cool.
All this knowledge. This is great. Oh, my goodness. I'll be even more disciplined after this show.
Well, I've been, dealing with these crises with this dear friend. So if you don't acquire more knowledge in the face of a crisis, when are you going to, If there was ever a time to get very, very serious about acquiring all the information I needed and use all the information I already had, this was the week,
Oh, boy. Everybody has to pay attention. Sooner or later,
Yeah.
it's really going to matter.
Yeah, and then I've seen this denial thing, and it's really tragic.
Absolutely. Well, moving forward, how can we actually decide for ourselves, let's say, the balance between obsessing about health or ignoring it?
Well, it's funny. My father used to have this great expression, which I had forgotten about. And his expression was, anyone who has more than 3 scars is a hypochondriac. And forget about plastic surgery. We're not talking about plastic surgery here because my father has been gone for a long time before the days of chronic plastic improvements. But, you know, think about it. So there are a lot of people who are constantly obsessed with their health. And, you know, they may go to the gym every single day, and then their joints wear out. You know, or one of my dear friends who's you know, an adventure sports kind of guy. He's always doing some sort of an adventure sport thing. So, you know, he just broke his wrist, and he's recovering from that, and it's healing okay. Now he's recovering from a previous shoulder injury. You know, and I say to him, you know, the joke is, I can't do any of that stuff, and I haven't broken anything. You know? And if I sprain or strain anything, I immediately go to Dr. Carilla or Dr. Schroeder, like instantaneously. You know, I'm out the door. So it's about being proactive, taking care of ourselves, making sure we're conscious. The key here,
Yes.
it's consciousness. You're a living organism, living in a body, living on a planet Earth that spins. So take care. Be conscious.
I like perfect. That is
Oop,
the
I
key
feel
word.
it spinning.
Great observation. Big requirement. Oh my. Okay. Well, Susan, I let's say what you're saying then is that we must walk the middle path between extremes so we can indeed create and maintain health without denial or creating more of what we don't want. Those are our options.
With cancer, which I think is probably as frightening as anything out there, right? Because with heart disease, yes, it's very frightening to think of having a stroke. But now with all the bypasses and all the consciousness about bypasses, there are a lot less strokes happening, you know? So if we think about heart attacks, the good news is a lot of people just die instantly, which is, of course, what everybody's looking for. Everyone's looking for a peaceful and painless death. Now, if we talk about cancer, cancer to me is unacceptable. It's just unacceptable because at the moment, the human race doesn't know how to cure it. Really, most of the time, though, you know, some cancers respond very well. They don't know how to prevent a lot of it, but what we're learning is that rage has a huge, huge contributing factor to people who develop cancer and also to people who don't eliminate cancer. And that's very interesting. I just spoke to someone who's a cancer survivor, and I said something to her, and she responded, and then she said to me, I didn't mean to be argumentative. Now, my experience of her is that she's never been anything but argumentative in like 20, 30 years. Now, it's interesting because she's a cancer survivor. I'm guessing that she learned something from either some support group or some therapist or someone told her that in order to survive from cancer, in order to transform the whole component and build the immune system, one has to eliminate rage and anger.
That's a big reason.
Huge. I mean, it's huge, huge. And that means, you know, anger at ourselves, anger at others. Because, you know, you really have to believe you deserve to survive. And this was very scary because I asked this question last week. I said to my friend, what percentage are you committed to surviving? What percentage do you believe you deserve to survive? And I didn't like the answer I got back because the answer I was looking for was, I deserve to survive 100%. I'm worth it. I didn't get that answer. So be sure that you can say that. about yourself, because you are worth it.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's the truth.
You too, baby.
Thank you. Well, I can see now we're going to enjoy a clip. This will be with Reverend Bernard Goodman, Perception. I hope you enjoy, and we'll be right back.
Many of you are going to be taking trips, physical trips, to different parts of this planet for different purposes. And you will be guided to go there. And you will be caused to go there through something that is called setup and choreography. Does anybody in this room not know what setup and choreography are? Okay. Setup is something that spirit creates for a purpose. Choreography is the physical activity of that. Anybody want to give an example of that?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I had the idea that I need to take Linnea to India now, not some imaginary time in the future. I received an email from this cruise ship booking company who has known me for like 7 years, and I haven't received an email invitation to make it happen in 7 years. And so my thought about Linnea was followed within days by this email. And then I had a couple of conversations and emails that were beyond effortless. Basically, I could say nothing wrong. There was no right. Whatever I said was, oh, okay, great, perfect. And then they sent me 3 opportunities. Did I want to go in April of next year, November of next year, or December of next year? That was basically, it. A complete setup, complete choreography. I really didn't have anything to do with it.
And wait till you see what happens with that.
When are you going? April.
And you're going where?
It's a long itinerary, and the first stop is Bombay, which was where I used to live. So that was the most exciting thing to me.
You see how they created that so that you would go? They know us better than we know ourselves. And they protect us from ourselves because they know we mess up all the time. Thank God for that.
And I was thinking, I'd like to go to I said I'd like to go to Bombay or Chennai for sure, because I have really good friends in both places. So the trip in April, starts in Bombay, and the trip in November, December starts in Chennai. So it's like, whoa.
Well, you'll be going there more than once, so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I, they asked me to teach meditation. And then I thought, well, I should also be teaching, shopaholic behavior in India, because that was certainly me. And I just, I threw it in as I could teach them about shopping for fashion, men, women, children. I could teach them about home furnishings and antiques, and I could teach them about, jewelry, all that, because I, only spent like $1 million on all that stuff. And luckily, not all my money, for my clients. And do that topic too. Oh, what fun! What fun! I mean, it's all just so much fun.
Boy, are they going to use you.
Whenever God's involved, it's just so much more fun than when I have to struggle through it.
That's right.
It's so much
Natural and easy.
Right.
Right. Now, your trip to Alaska, Red, is going to be bombastic.
Cool.
Not Bombay, but bombastic. And you and Sandy are going to have a ball.
That'll be wonderful.
You'll be dancing on the ship. Dancing on the ship. Probably with each other, but you'll be dancing on the ship.
We'll still have fun.
Yes. And when you come back from Alaska, you will bring all kinds of joys and toys for everybody in the family.
Cool.
A lot of souvenirs, I guess you would call them.
Easy and
Yeah. Magical. Now we're going to be giving each of you a magic box. We're going to be implanting it into your brain. It's going to be a communication box.
Is that like a GPS so you can always keep track of us?
And a power on and off box. And a GPS program to the stars and the planets and the galaxies. But nothing on the ground. And you will have liftoffs at different times.
You know, people often ask me, it seemed as if something was going to happen, Susan, and then it didn't happen. And they don't understand why. And that can be a health issue. It can be a financial issue. What happened with this trip to India, you know, is very interesting. Because Linnea was dealing with different issues and didn't want to travel. And not only was the trip canceled because there was some sort of a mix-up with the cruise line, and I was perfectly happy about it, but then, as if my intention to be able to get out of going wasn't, I was not going to brook any disagreement, the kitchen of the cruise ship burned. The entire cruise was canceled for everybody. So I thought to myself, well, now I know I didn't wish for that. But it was really weird. It was as if no way was I going on this cruise because there was something very important I had to do with her here. Strange, huh? I mean, I thought it was very, very strange.
But you accepted it? No stress?
What are you going to do? I just laughed. I was like, wow. Everybody got their money back. It's fine.
Interesting how that worked out. We were saying goodbye for a little bit.
So strange.
Well, we have her here. She's safe. Oh, my. Well, okay, let's explore this. Let's talk about caretaking. As we get older, most of us actually will care for someone who is ill, and I wonder if you'd share with us what's the most crucial factor in that situation?
You know, I find that people who are taking care of someone who's very ill and then potentially dying have a huge tendency to forget to take care of themselves. I see this again and again. And it's not only extraordinarily stressful to care for somebody who's dying, because somebody who's dying who's frightened may be pulling your energy out of you, consciously or unconsciously. It's that there are certain energetic things going on that most people aren't aware of. So you've got to keep your energy very strong. You've got to keep yourself completely peaceful, and you have to be careful about the connection, even if it's your most beloved family member. You have to be very careful so that you stay present and calm and fully functioning. And most people don't understand that. They feel guilty. If they go away for an hour, they feel guilty.
Boy, that's a big one, isn't it? To hold yourself in check for your own best interests. Thank you for reminding us. And what about people who have, let's say, an undesirable diagnosis and who are continuously seeing doctors and having more and more tests?
You know, it's so interesting. As I was sitting in this oncology office with a friend over the last couple of months, I was so aware of the lack of energy there. And so, normally you get a patient and you get a family member. And I am telling you that I felt like I was at a funeral. Every time I would sit in that office, and I would have to sit in the office for 2 or 3 hours at a time while my friend went through different stuff. And I'm telling you, honestly, that it felt as if I was in a funeral parlor. And a lot of people around me were getting great results, and they were excited, but their level of excitement, their energy level was so low. It was such poor energy that it's not the same thing as a soccer game. If you're going to a soccer game to see your child play, it's the opposite end of the spectrum. And I really had this thought, I can't keep coming here. I can't keep coming here. This not a healthy and safe place for me to be.
And therefore, we have to pay attention to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Boy, thank you for admitting
Oh,
and
yeah.
acknowledging that too. I understand what you're saying.
I had my iPod with me every time, and I would immediately play meditation music and uplifting music. And this one time, my iPod did something weird, and it would only play music for 3 minutes at a time, and then it would shut off. And I tried to be there without the iPod. But listening to the conversations around me was so, deadening. What I opted to do, like a crazy person, is sit out there with the iPod, and I would just do like this, and then it would stop, and I was like this, and I would stop, and I was like this, and I would stop. Just because as soon as the music went on, the vibe of that music was so joyous and so alive, it was like a completely different world. So I was really managing my moods, and that's what I'm saying. You have to do that. If you're really going to be helpful as a caretaker, you have to absolutely manage your moods. And I don't mean be in denial and stay busy and be unconscious. I mean be present and manage your moods.
Oh, I love that. Very nice advice. Thank you, Susan. So let's explore what happens to people that don't want to adjust as they get older and who want to continue life as if they were 20, 30, 40, 50, etc.
If only. It would be great. Wouldn't it be great to still be surfing without a thought, right?
Oh,
but
sure.
But then there's that guy who was living on Hollister Ranch who didn't see the wave, and suddenly there was another wave and another wave unexpectedly. He had a massive heart attack and died. Now, his father said to me, he died doing what he loved most, which is true. But I don't think he would have chosen to die in his late 40s doing what he loved most. I have a feeling that if he had had any idea that the shock of 2 or 3 waves in quick succession would have caused him to have a massive heart attack, I have a feeling if he knew that, he probably would have avoided surfing that day.
Yes.
That's, again, I didn't know him, but I knew I met his father and his mother. And so making intelligent choices for different times in our life means that we have to be willing to say, well, George Bush Sr., he went skydiving, remember? Like on his 80th birthday or something? Yeah, but he didn't go last year. So at some point, you say to yourself, okay, this is worth it, this isn't worth it. This is what's a priority for me to meet my need, and this isn't. And only you know that. Nobody else can make those decisions.
Make those right choices for yourself. Thank you, Susan. So how then can a caretaker retain peace and grounding during a loved one's health issues?
I don't know how those of you who've had children were able to go through the early phase where the child is crying at night, if the child is crying at night, and then you have another child, and then you have to get up the next morning because you have the other child, or if you work. Where I grew up, they had baby nurses, so this was a non-issue for my family, And it's like everybody that I knew, their mothers had baby nurses. Some very expert person with, Red Cross skills and all that business, and the mother slept. And now, of course, you see the doula, the doula where this person not only comes home from the hospital and takes care of the baby, but also takes care of the mother. Now, in a situation of caretaking, you have the similar situation. You've got to find a way, one has to find a way to have support, whether it's nurses' aides, whether it's hospice, whether it's family members, whether it's friends, somebody has to organize things. Because otherwise, the caretaker, the most loved one, can go down for the count just like the other person. You hear stories where a husband or a wife dies, and 6 months later, the other person dies. Now, it's a very romantic notion. But sometimes it's simply that caretaker wore himself or herself out. And so that's not anything that anybody would want to do. So you have to be careful. Really be conscious again. Be conscious.
Thank you. And realize we can't do everything ourselves.